Hi, welcome to Cousin Culture for 1/12/2019. We're up to, well, before we get to the movie, all the arbitration, guys signed. Poor hobby. Poor is not quite the right word. Shockingly enough, Baez only settled for $5 million, which is $2 million below his projection, which is a little bit, sad to me. He's still overpaid. Anyway, just sort of morally. Anyway, we're up to the 1977 Best Picture winner Annie Hall. It's a Woody Allen film. I'm not going to get into the personal life of Woody Allen because that's kind of irrelevant to my interests at this time. Woody Allen's humor is very neurotic. It's very intellectual, and I can understand why that doesn't really necessarily work for people, for everyone. But in any case, I find him very, very funny. And I adore Annie Hall, the film. It's really at its heart an experimental film, and so I'm actually going to talk mostly about sort of the story structure in the film, because it's ultimately just a portraiture of a couple falling in love and then falling out of love, and it's only because of the way it's put together on top of Allen's wit and Keaton's charming performance that it's such a good film. One thing I will say, as far as I'm concerned, thus far, and I've seen most of the Best Pictures and most of the other nominees. So far, though, this movie suffered the biggest snub in all of Oscar history because of what I'll get into in the next section. It wasn't even nominated for, but it should have been nominated. It should have won. If at least, at the very least, it shouldn't have been nominated for best editing. Anyway, okay. Before I get into the editing thing, this movie is absolutely delightful and charming to me. A lot of the pathos and niceness comes from Diane Keaton playing Woody Allen's muse, because he's playing basically himself. Albie, a singer, is basically a version of Woody Allen. And Keaton is charming and evanescent and absolutely pathos. And it's really a very sort of moving picture of a couple who falls in love and then falls out of love because they're too different. They're not really compatible. But anyway, to explain the editing thing, this movie famously began its life, and I'm not making this up, it's well documented. This movie began its life as a murder mystery, not as a romantic comedy, and it's supposed to be was supposed to be three different strands, where the Albie Singer and Annie Hall relationship was one strand, and then the main strand was supposed to be a murder mystery, and another strand was supposed to be him just dealing with the banality of life, and the three strands were supposed to bounce off of each other. And some of this still remains in the film, in this part of the aspect, which is just true free association, because the movie is structured around like Albie Singer's stream of consciousness, but they cut the film together. And it was relatively apparent that the film wasn't working, largely because the whole free association thing was too much. There was no sense of momentum or anything, and so Rosenbaum, who was the editor, and Allen looked at the film in The Harsh Day of Light, and they decided to cut it. It was originally like 2.5 hours, 3 hours, and they eventually just cut out Annie Hall from this material, walking back and forth to the master cutting, where they reshaped the entire story to be a romantic comedy, and there's not a hint of it. And so not only is that amazing that they basically cut out a great film from a bad film, but it's also the timeline and everything. They still sort of kept the dissident free association stream of consciousness stuff, which is why I'm showing this scene, because this scene is Alvy talking to the audience, so therefore it gets into your head that he is you're in his point of view, and that's important because the movie bounces around in time. The timeline's actually a jumble, so like you see it's relatively straightforward how all the scenes fit together chronologically, but you actually see like the first parts of the breakup first, and then you see the meeting scene a little bit towards the middle, and that stuff is really cool and interesting to watch. And the other thing that makes the editing very very challenging to do what they did is the way in which this movie was shot. Because Woody Allen likes this sort of film take, is a lot of the shots are very, very long. I think the average shot is 30 seconds or something in this film, which isn't very, very long in cinema. Maybe so it made it hard to cut apart the scene. So for the editing, you had the main story cut from a larger film. That story itself is jumbled temporally, and it's done to keep things moving. Juxtaposition to its free association. It's just an amazing editing job. Okay, so this scene right here is one of my favorite gags in the entire film, and it's basically, I'm showing it also because it sort of sets up the humor in the film, which is all about free association and dissidence and just disconcerting images. And so this little girl going, "I'm into leather," it's absolutely hysterical to me, especially how the kid delivers it. It's just amazingly funny. Okay, so this scene right here is actually occurs towards the middle of the film. It's sort of the meeting scene, and this is one of the best meeting scenes of a couple of I've ever seen. And also, cleverly enough, the way in which it's written, is there's going to be a gag here where the upper subtitles are actually what the characters are thinking, and the lower subtitles are what they are saying. And you already get the sense that these are people who aren't, because ultimately they don't end up together. It's about the relationship running its course. But in the meeting scene, you already get the sense, because of this joke with the subtitles, that they can relate to each other superficially, but they don't relate to each other on a deep, fundamental level. And so you understand why they fall. The relationship ultimately doesn't work, because the seeds of them falling apart is right here. And because it's edited in such a way that there's a scene curves towards the middle, it works as both as the introduction and the explanation of why the relationship turns south. With that being said, it also, I think, really captures the awkwardness of trying to flirt, especially if you are sort of an introvert, nervous person. And it's just absolutely hysterical to me. And of course, Diane Keaton sort of famously, that tomboyish look was really popular. It's kind of ushered in the androgynous phase in the 80s a little bit. And again, going back to the editing and how it was just sort of hard to remove stuff because of the length of shots. This shot right here, it's almost a couple minutes. Okay, so this bit is a good example of how the juxtaposition works with the editing scheme. Because what you're watching right here happened like a year before, and he's talking about her going to do adult education, and it cuts to a year later when they're really having a fight. And he's like, adult education is stupid, so it shows the passage of time, but also the hypocrisy in the neuroses of it. And then another thing the film does a lot, because it's set up as a free association, is you have a lot of these cutaway scenes, and they're all very hysterical to me, especially the one right here. Because there's just something about how this guy says large vibrating egg. It's just funny to me, and I really like that. And then a lot of this stuff isn't just for jokes, because like that guy is showing that he's willing to compromise with his wife, and maybe Albie should as well. And then this couple, even though they're portrayed as ditzes and everything like that, they show sort of the importance of compatibility, because they're very compatible because they are ditzes. There's also a subtle joke about maybe ignorance is bliss, because one of the things that Albie Singer and Woody Allen does too much is think too much. And it's not just, I mean, it goes really quite far, and this is the scene where it goes the furthest in the free association. This is the only stuff in Best Pictures there is animated. It's a little bit sexist with the whole you're getting your period, though Albie's not supposed to be necessarily a sympathetic character. And I absolutely love that Woody Allen goes that far. Okay, so the other thing the film does is stuff like this. These split screens to show the contrasting nature, and it's really interesting in this scene that how they're not disagreeing about the facts, but the perceptions are off, because the therapist asks how they often have sex, and he's like, we're barely having any, only 3 times a week, and she's like, all the time, 3 times a week. So like they don't disagree with like how much they're having, they're just how much that means, and there's something very poignant about that to me. And again, so all this sort of stuff with editing and cutting the film apart with the free association, the time being jumbled, it not only makes it very, very funny, but it's a very structurally tearing film, and it's actually sort of structurally one of the weirdest Best Picture winners, because it's very, very anti-plot, where it's mostly not structured like a traditional narrative, and it's all jumbled together, and it somehow manages to work. So I can't believe it wasn't nominated for editing. That's a tragedy to me. Anyway, see you guys tomorrow.